Hello? How do I check if mic is working?
Can anyone just speak if the mic is working?
From here can join and check where my
I think it is. Yeah, it should work. So we're gonna start now. Before we start with the actual talk, just to tell a little bit about DevDay. It's a monthly event that we have at Sahaj, where we have people from it can be people from our own company or people from the community to come here and talk about an interesting problem or a topic that they have faced and dealt with. So that's it. Today, we're going to have Jaya talk about understanding design depth. So over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Vikas.
Introduce yourself.
Hello. Okay. Hey everybody, good evening. So today we are going to talk about understanding design depth. A quick introduction about me. I'm Jayalakshmi Dini, and I have been working as a product designer for past 10 years. So like everybody over here like has traveled today to come to the office, or like have gone to their office, whoever is remotely, they travel, right? Today also, like when I came to the office, I used a carpool app. So people who don't know, carpool app is like where you look for riders who are going to your nearby destination, and you get all those riders. You can see all the riders who are basically going to the same place where you are, and basically you can look up for all those riders, right? So today when I was using it, I got a lot of notifications that there are a few people who are riding, like Abhijit is riding. Do you want to join them? Or Surabhi is riding, can you join them? I got like bunch of notifications for the same. And then when I clicked on that, it didn't take me to that particular rider. It actually redirected me to the dashboard, right? It redirected me to the dashboard. That notification was of no use, right? Then that was like a not so good experience for me. And then I switched to Uber, and I booked a cab and came here. So all these kind of experiences, we have so many experiences. When we go to a restaurant, we have some experience, whether good or bad. Like for example, like say, like the waiter is not looking at you, right? You're hungry, and you are waiting for the waiter and they don't come. So you have a bad experience. Or it could be like you ordered something and it was good, and the manager comes and asks you, right, how is it? Do you need any improvement and all that? You feel like you're wanted. You have good experiences. So so in our day-to-day life, we have various types of experiences that are good and bad, right? So let me quickly share the screen first. Yeah. So basically, we have various types of experiences that we go through, right? And these experiences could be good, bad, or neutral, right? And all these experiences impact our personal lives and also professional lives, how we work and how we react and all that, right? It experiences so basically impact our life. So, and also as like we are all technologists who are here, most of us are like in the technology field. It's not just these customers are like, these businesses like restaurant owners. We are also like, as a technologist, as a solution consultant, we are also responsible for some of these experiences, right? Like, for example, we are building any digital solutions, and even in digital solution space, we are responsible for these kind of experiences, different experiences. It could be like, are you building a e-commerce app, or it's like a like internal app, or it could be an registration app or something like that, right? So you are impacting the experiences of the end users. So there, as I mentioned, there are good and bad experiences and some neutral. So we will focus on the bad experiences and not so good experiences, right? Because we are talking about design that. So basically, if we focus on this bad or not so good experiences, these are few examples, right? It could be like, you build something which is not adopted by the market, right? So it reduces the adoption, it reduces the customer satisfaction because of the bad experiences, or there is increase in customer support call because you had issues in your platform or product that you have built, or there are like more tickets that are raised, or it could be like there is difficulty in registration process, your onboarding process to your product is very it's not good, right? And there could be many more. So our digital solutions that we are building as technologists, we are responsible for those experiences. And why does this happen? It's result of design depth. So we all are aware, like ex-technologists, we are also aware of technical depth, right? So similarly, we have something called design depth. There is a lot of overlap between technology depth and design depth. We'll look about it. So what is depth, right? So depth is like actually an analogy that we use for even the design depth. But what is a depth, right? It's like something we borrow now, which we have to pay later, right? Like in finance terms, it means you're borrowing money now, which you have to eventually pay later, right? So similarly, design depth is like something which you borrow now. You do it for short-term thing. That is, you rush to do the coding, or you rush to do the implementation because there is no budget right now to test with the end users, right? Because right now you don't have access to the users. You are just building something based on hypothesis, and you are implementing faster, but you need to pay that later, saying like because of inconsistent user experience or slower app, and various other reasons, right? Because you're rushing into something, you have to pay back that later. And that is what is design depth. Now we will talk more elaborately on this, that we'll try to understand why does design depth matter to us as a team, right? You must be thinking like, why does it matter? Like as a solution consultant, why should I care about it? And then we will discuss about like how do we get into this design trap, right? And what we can do to tackle it. So first is like, why does design depth matter to us? So as we started with it, like, as a technologist, we are building these digital solutions where we are solving some problem, right? We are in this business of solving problem. Our digital solutions are solving some user problems, right? And since we are talking about user problems, let's categorize these users broadly into these two categories. There are some users who are using your digital solution who have options, and there are some who don't have an option, right? Like for example, the users, yeah. Sorry, it's there. Okay. Yeah. So if we broadly categorize into these users, right? So basically the users, there are some users who have options who are using your digital solution, and there is like other categories like they don't have options. Like for example, when I say have options, it's like the users have other alternatives. There is a competitive product in the market who has similar product, right? And or it could be it doesn't impact the user. Maybe it could be like an e-commerce platform. I just used it once. I just maybe it was a bad experience, but if I don't use or buy anything, it doesn't impact me. It's okay. I just checked it out, right? So I have options, or it doesn't have, it doesn't impact me if I don't use your product. And the other one is like, other category is like where the users don't have option. Like for example, the government body portals, right? Like for example, if I have to process a visa application, I have to use that portal, right? I don't have any option. There is no other alternative, right? I have to use those government portal, whether it's a birth certificate registration, a passport, I have to use it. I don't have any other option. And it could be that your product doesn't have any competition, right? Or it could be like a company-wide platform. Let's take an example like an organization has a communication channel, right? And as a member of that organization, I don't have a choice because a communication channel has been already been, that's a business a decision that they want to use a particular communication channel in the company, right? So I'm obliged to use that communication platform, right? So I don't have an option, to use any other channel. But eventually,
I think there are people who are serious in the chat. Someone's hand is raised.
or they don't have.
It is paused. It's saying screen share is paused. You have to resume it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, desktop one.
Okay. So going back to that example, like a company and organization where you are working, if there is a communication channel that they are already using, you're obliged to use that particular communication platform, whether or not you have a good or bad experiences, right? But eventually what will happen if it is like a really bad communication channel, that category of user may have options, right? Because the company may choose to change that communication channel, right? Over a period of time. Like for example, a decade back when we were using the IRCTC portal, it was really, now they have quite improved it. So basically, like for example, if I had to choose, book a ticket saying from Bangalore to Pune, I had to type the code called SBC, and I really figured it out later on that SBC is for Bangalore code. And if I typed BNG or BNG, it wasn't showing the result as Bangalore, right? So they did improve, but later on, like nowadays, there are a lot of authorized partners, like for example, Redbus, you can book the ticket where now if you see, it really shows the results of Bangalore, but IRCTC, though they have improved, they have not yet improved, right? Though is a government website, because as I mentioned, it's a government website, so it works, right? But if it's if it is a private or like the product which will make money, like for example Redbus, they need to improve that that platform so that they stay in the business, right? Yeah, that's the reason, right? Because that's that's why we need to take care of design depth, because it impacts the growth and sustenance of the business. To be in the business, to be in the market, they need to improve the experiences of the users. And what is the result of is like, eventually, if there are bad user experiences, user faces a lot of issues while using your product, there is loss of trust, and in turn, it will affect the ROI, the return to investment. This affects the growth and sustenance of the business, and it affects the perceived value. what does perceived value means, right? Like, for example, this house, it works. The doors and the windows are all functional. It works. The house, maybe even the house is functional, but the house is not maintained well, and maybe that it doesn't have the latest trend and facilities. So it reduces the perceived value. Like, for example, the cars, right? If there is scratch in the car, the value of that car reduces, right? Even if it's a minor scratch. Now, that's the reason, like, why the design depth is important, because it affects the growth and sustenance of the business. Now we will try to understand how do we get into this design depth. One of the major reason is short-term goals. As a team, as a stakeholder, it's very natural for us to take care of short-term goals, because it is something which you can see the value of it like in every sprint and in every demo, right? Like, for example, if it is like a weekly sprint or a bi-weekly sprint, we want to see something at the end of that sprint, right? And that's why it's very natural for the team members and the stakeholders to look at short-term goals, because that's something they will see every week, or like, every bi-weekly, right? And in the end, what happens is they they go for shortcuts, right? Like, for example, over here, like, this is an example. The design is not about, like, how it looks, but it's about how it works, right? Eventually they look for short-term, okay, let's build this feature, but they don't really see it, whether it really works or not, right? The another reason is this, everyone understands this concept, like minimum viable product, right? In the name of saying it's a minimum viable product, we often miss the whole point of it. Like, in design world, we have a joke saying, if Hindi, MVP actually means mera wala pehla, right? Which actually in English means like my thing first, right? It's all about prioritization, right? When you go to this backlog refinement call, right? Usually there are some people who overpower the decision, like what features need to go first, right? And eventually we don't really see whether it actually works for the user, right? Like, say the example, like, security feature. Security feature is actually you add it because to check the vulnerability. But if it does not really solve that issue, then there is no point in having that security feature, right? So is it really MVP is something that we need to question when we say the word MVP, right? And the other reason for any design depth is feature creep. It's actually related to the short-term goal, right? In the short-term goals, why we always focus on building like features, as mentioned, like, we always want to add features, because that is something which gives a dopamine effect to the stakeholder and also the whole team, right? And this leads to feature creep, right? So basically the winter is come, winter may or not come, or like monsoon may or may not come because of climate change, but feature creep will always come in any project, right? Why? Because, as I mentioned, it gives that dopamine effect to the stakeholders and team members. They are like very happy. All these balls are like, they consider it as like features, right? We are so many happy. Oh, we build this, we build this, we build that. But what it happens is, like, for the users, it's of no use if you are building that features. And why all these three things happen is because lack of empathy towards the business and also towards the users. So basically, what is empathy is like, you need to understand what actually the business and the users need. Like, for example, let's take this example, right? We try to fit in the requirement without understanding whether it is usable. Like, let's take this example. That is a requirement in this small area. You need to put in 5 trash cans and 10 sitting area. That is the requirement, and you just put it. Is it usable? It's not usable. Nobody will sit there, right? Similarly, even in digital solutions, we fit the requirements, so we are rushing to that implementation so fast that we don't eventually see whether it will actually be usable or not. Right. Like, for example, again, we don't test it with the whether it works or not with the end user, right? Like, for example, this is another example. There is a notification feature we happily built, right? Okay, there is like, user is notified, okay, this. But it annoys the user, it leads to frustration, is something that emotion we are not able to capture when we are building any feature. So on the other hand, if you see, Instagram is more, okay, Instagram is like, there is a consolidated one-shot notification, right? That would be enough. Now we saw that, how we get into design depth. Now we will see how we can, what we can do to tackle it. So I'm using the word tackle because we can't really overcome design depth, but we can tackle it, like, by doing something that is, possible to do in, like, in our day-to-day project life cycle. Like, for example, we need to acknowledge it, that design depth do exist, and then communicate it and document it, right? Acknowledging, how do you do that? And how do you communicate that in your day-to-day stand-up, or in your day-to-day meeting, in your day-to-day conversation with your team members or with your stakeholders, right? In all you put the user first. What does the user need? What are their problems? And who are those users we are, trying to solve the problem? And also the documentation, right? A lot of times, the documentation is always in the heads of the team members, and it's because it does take time. Like, even like in the beginning, it feels like it's very time consuming, but in the end, it's really helpful to document it, because you are not like, the team may expand, or there are change in team members, or there are new entries to the team. That's why that's the reason we need to always document it, right? And also, if there is the project goes on for a long time, you don't remember what was decided, and it's really helpful to document each and everything. Now, since we talked about that, we are in the business of solving user problems, how about changing the narrative from features to problems to be solved, right? It's very common, right? I mean, any project, when we start, we always have this feature list, right? After doing analysis, research, or whatever, this is the first document that everyone loves to see, right? Like, what are we building? Even the stakeholders and also the team members, right? Even like as a technologist, as a developers, we want to see, okay, what are the features we are going to build? Because suddenly, like, we want to look out for solutions and libraries over there, right? And how to implement it. How about changing this feature? Like, let's take an example. These are some examples, right? Like onboarding, notification feature, security, validation, all these are like the examples. Can we change the narrative from features to the problems that we solve? Like, for example, onboarding. Why we need an easy onboarding process, right? When we say onboarding, and when we are implementing as a solution consultant or as a technologist, we are just thinking about the feature, how to implement it. But there is no understanding about what problems we are trying to solve. If we change the narrative from features to problems, like, for example, the problems could be, I'm trying to reduce the customer churn, or I'm trying to, we are trying to reach new markets, or we are trying to reduce the risk and damage. If we understand why you want a security feature, it is to reduce the risk and damage, then you come up with the proper solutions, right? Like for example, in a product where if we say, okay, the feature is to build search, filter, and listing, right? But why are you even building that functionality? It is for finding the right items, right? Like the location, why? I mean, I just can't really use any library that's there in the market and just build the location feature. But the real reason for giving a location feature was to reach to a particular destination, and it could be more elaborate problem statement. And my favorite one is the dashboard. Okay. A lot of times we build dashboard, like I've built so many dashboards, and everyone, I mean, there are so many easily available widgets, and developers and everybody, the team like to just put all the pie charts and all that fancy stuff, but they don't eventually see, what is the value of that dashboard, right? The dashboard actually, it should be a summary to help you analyze. And they need to understand, if we put this, instead of putting a feature list saying dashboard, if we put it as a problem statement, oh, I need a summary to help me analyze, then we start thinking from that angle, like why I need the dashboard, what are those elements or widgets that would help me analyze the KPIs, right? So a feature, whenever we just talk about features in any of our project conversations, it's like a red flag for me. But if we start talking about problems, we are actually trying to solve the user problem. So let's try to change. I mean, the best way to tackle this design depth is changing the narrative from building features to solving the user problems. Now, the next one is using the UI frameworks wisely. I would like to give an example, like in one of my older projects, we had to build a widget, and there were like some 10-15 features we had to build it. And the first immediate thing that as developers, like they go Google, and they got all the libraries, they looked for the widgets and all that, and they said, okay, we got something very close to what we want, and it had 50 other items also. But we didn't needed all that 50 items, we just needed the 10 items only. But eventually they try to convince, okay, no, at least you have the 10 items, right? So it's okay, you are getting it for free, right? It's like ek mein ek free mila, right? But what happens is it's like this thali, right? I think in Pune we have something called Maharaja thali, no, the Bahubali thali, right? It has like it's so huge. You can't finish the thali unless you are like the wrestler, the great Khali. But I mean, it's impossible to finish that thali, right? But so UI libraries are sometimes like that, right? Where you get a lot of things which you are not eventually going to use it, but in the end you just use it because it's available, it's freely available, and even the stakeholders are happy to see, oh, okay, there are so many things available, because we stop talking about the problems we are trying to solve. We are just thinking about features to be developed, right? And that's the reason, going back to the earlier point, it's important to think about what problems you're trying to solve and not just thinking about features to be developed, right? So similarly, in this UI library, so the developer said, and they said, like, okay, if you want to remove the other 40 features, 40 items that you don't want in the widget, then we will remove it. And they had to refactor it so much that it actually, we had to like, after the end of 2 months, we had to actually check out that code and build it from scratch. So using these libraries, you need to, I mean, it's okay to use these libraries, but you need to use it wisely, right? Like, for example, it's a buffet, right? This reminds me of that Three Idiots movie, right? Where Amir Khan, the protagonist, is like, stuffing all that in his plate because it's a buffet and it's for free, and he's just stuffing. So UI libraries are something like that. It's there, available there in the Google. I mean, it's readily available, and you're just stuffing in your plate, right? And there is so much wastage out of, because you are not able to enjoy it and satisfy yourself, right? So So how do you have to use it? Is like you use what you need. It's okay to use a library and all that widget, but you need to see whether you actually need it or not, and then use it for in your digital solution. And the next is like maintaining a design system, right? So what is a design system is, why do we need a design system, right? When we are writing a code, right, it's not a personal diary, right? It's something that others have to actually use it, right? Like my personal, actually, I used a very good image. My personal diary is not so nice, but like even the code, right? Even as a technologist, when we are writing a code, like for example, the variable names, right? It really, why do we have to write the variable names which others understand? Because eventually someone else will be referring to your code, right? So similarly, even in design, it is for others, right? Others to see and others to experience. And that's why we need to also take care of the design system, right? If you look at any legacy product or even your current product, right, a quick audit, there will be some and the other design depth, right? There will be like so many team members involved in building that same digital solution. They will have their own pop-ups and all that things. This is just an example, not just pop-up. It could be various other things they build based on like their understanding, because there is no proper documentation or no proper design system that is built. Okay, for pop-up, you need to use this. For this particular component, you have to use this and all that, right? There is no proper style guide to guide the team members what they need to do when they are building any widget or any feature or anything in that digital solution, right? So, and that's why it's very important to maintain a design system in from the beginning of the project. If it is not been maintained from the beginning of project, we have to start doing it at first. The design system is like any other documentation. It can be very tedious, but you need to start somewhere, right? It could be like, for example, even like how a particular onboarding process should be, right? And the same thing, if if there is a wizard that we need to build in the same digital solution, if we have to build another wizard, you use that as a reference, right? And that's why it's anything that works in your digital solution, you put that in the design system. So basically, that's the point, that anything that's tested and validated and works, make it usable, document it so that others also use the same. I think the same thing is there in the coding practices also, right? Anything that works, you validate, and you make it reusable, make it as a library so that others can also use it. Same is with the design system. Anything that works, you put it in the design system and document it. So that is these are the various things, why does design depth matter and how are we in this design depth and what we can do to tackle it. Of course, we can't overcome it, but we can tackle it by changing the narrative from features to problems, by maintaining a design system, by using the UI libraries wisely. And yes, and it's not a journey, it's a sprint, right? So basically, sorry, it's a journey and not a sprint. So basically, it's not something you can overcome like in a sprint, like in a week or two. It's like you have to start with something, right? Like for example, building a design system, you need to start at least small things, and people can contribute, or each and every team member can contribute to build that design system. Yeah. So that's about it, and thank you, and we can have a Q&A session.
This whatever you gave was very good as a principle or as a best practices. Sometimes some principle may have another conflict with another principle. So how do we do that kind of conflict management between multiple principles to be implemented, whatever you mentioned. So in that scenario, how do you handle that? Hi, were you able to hear me?
Is there a glitch? We can't hear Jaya if she's speaking.
Oh, yeah. Can you repeat, Mr. Bhuti?
Yeah. Can you hear me now? Better? Better now? Okay.
Yeah, I'm speaking. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm able to speak, but can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, yes. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. See, whatever you gave was pretty good. Let's say I can consider it as a principles or a best practices. Suppose there are conflicts between two. We need to implement, what I meant to say, principle number one, it might have with conflict with principle number two. So with that kind of scenarios, how do we handle that? How do you manage it? How do you take a priorities?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I got the question. So the question was, if there are 2, 3 principles, there will be always a conflict between these two principles, and how do you manage it and prioritize it, right? So this is okay. I think there is a lag. So basically, yes. So regarding this, right? So we did talk about, always there is a trade-off that you need to do when you are doing any prioritization, right? So one of the technique is, I'm hearing my own voice. So basically, since this is always there in any project, right? There is always a conflict of interest. There is always, like, whether you, as I mentioned, right? The stakeholders want to see the features every time, right? Or it could be the team also is like focusing on getting the features out, right? So there will be always conflict of interest when you are building anything, right? Any digital solution. So for that, one of the technique that we use is talk about the real emotions, like in these meetings and this prioritization meetings, right? That's the one reason that I mentioned, rather than talking about features, talk about the problems you are trying to solve. And like, for example, one example I can give is like, in the user stories, I try to add some emotions to it. Like, like, for example, if we don't do this, the user will be frustrated and not use the product. If you don't do this, the user will be annoyed, right? So even in a prioritization technique, we have to always start putting the users first to get these things prioritized, right? These design solutions are designed that we are want to consider, these design principles that we want to consider, that takes a lead in the prioritization. And the other way is, what you can do is like have a separate prioritization track for these design related solutions, and see to it that at least one of these are always prioritized in these sprints, right? That also works. If there is a huge backlog, it helps that usually it's very natural that the team focuses on always on the functionality, right? You will always hear those kind of things, as I mentioned, that MVP wala thing, right? So basically MVP is like, in the minimum viable product, we always go for the functionality, right? So what you do in that case, right? What you can do is get a buy-in that at least you pick one story which is related to design depth in each of this sprint, right? And that way it could help to eventually overcome the design depth.
Another question. Let's say there is a two things, NFR as well as technical. Meaning, when do we consider more functional or technical issue? Suppose both are need some priority. So, which one is advisable to take high priority? Is it technical or functional perspective we have to consider?
Okay, so the question was, yeah. So the question was whether you need to consider the technical, whether you need to prioritize the technical or the functional requirement first. Is that right, Murthy?
Yes, yes. How do you prioritize between these two when the conflict arises?
Okay. Sometimes there is not much difference between this thing, right? I mean, why do we need to even separate that, the technology is different and these design depth is different, right? Because eventually you are using the technology to solve a user problems, right? So those are really correlated, right? Like, for example, technology is a very good thing, right? But eventually, if the technology is not helping you solve the problem, then there is no point in that technology. But it's not like demeaning the technology. Because of the technology, we are building such beautiful digital solutions. So it's actually, we should not really separate it. Technology is aid to solve that user problem. And basically it is about using the best technologies to solving that design. So basically it goes hand in hand.
Yeah, hi. I had a question. For all this, what tools do you use? Are there any specific tools that you would recommend for anything, like for design, for research, to collect KPIs?
Okay. Right. Okay, so the question was, is there any tools that you use to conduct the research and collect this data and all that? Is that correct? Okay. So basically, see, the tools are just means to, do anything better, right? There will be like hundreds of tools that are available in the market, right? Like, for example, research. It will always depend on what you're trying to do. If it's research, for example, that is Google form, but the Google form is just one type of tool based on what you're trying to capture, right? Now, Google form may not be the right user research tool. It could be the survey feedback. That's one of there are so many survey feedbacks available, right? So you need to test and do. Or it could be like first-hand interview with the users, right? So it really depends upon what you're trying to build, and you have to always test and try out, because the tools, like for example, the design tool, there are like some, if I go to the design tool, there is Figma, there is XD, and there are so many tools. Same is like with capturing the data, there are so many tools. Documentation tools are also so many different. There are so many documentation tools, like for example, Google Docs, Notion, and all that, right? So really, these tools really don't matter. I mean, it's about what works for your team and project. So, so the essence is like you, any tool that you use should help you collaborate with the stakeholders and your team members. I mean, any tool which helps you do that, then that's the best tool for you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I can go next. So we saw one of the example for the design did that like there are a lot of types of pop-ups, right? Like different team can have different expertise and accordingly they are building the pop-ups. So like in our coding, like we have term like code smell. So like similar to in the design, like how do I like identify that patterns? Like are there any predefined patterns to means to recognize now this is the tech debt in my project? Yeah.
You mean the UI patterns, Kirti?
Okay, like okay, I was talking in terms of the UI, but from the design perspective as well, how do I identify those patterns? Yeah.
Okay, so the next question was, how do you, okay, it's echoing. So the next question was how, the example that I gave you, that there are so many different types of pop-ups because many team members were involved in building that and they built it according to their understanding. And that's why when you do any quick audit, there you will find there is a lot of inconsistency in the user experience, right? So the question was, how do you identify this pattern, right? So the quick thing is like, I mean, you need to do a quick audit. I mean, not really quick, but if you do, like you spend a day, you will actually, I mean, any legacy product or any even the current product, you will find those patterns, right? It's just about observing and going through those product digital solutions and identifying, okay, what is inconsistent and documenting it, what is inconsistent, and you try to solve those inconsistent UI patterns.
Cool. Means what I got like inconsistency is one of the factor
Yes.
to identify that. Are there any other factors which we should look for?
Okay, so the question was, Kirti is mentioning that inconsistency is one of the pattern. The other one is like if like the user problems, right? If there is a drop off, what you need to do, right? So the user problems is also one of the problem pattern that you will help you identify that.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks. This helps.
And to add to that, it could be like, any feedback that you get from the users could help you identify what's working and what's not working.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay, I think, okay, Prashant has raised his hand. Go ahead, Prashant. Prashant, do we have any questions?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry, there's a problem with my microphone. So I have a question. Consider when you start designing anything, say any problem statement, say you have a feature or a solution. So you are given with a problem statement or a set of requirements. But in some and most of the cases, while designing it, you do have to keep space to accommodate features or functionality which might come up in future, which at this point of time we do not see or we cannot foresee. So my question is, in cases like this, how do you approach the design so that your design do not become very rigid, and at the same point of time, how flexible you can go so that you still have space or flexibility to accommodate future incoming use cases. So generally, what is the approach is preferable?
Okay. So the question Prashant is asking is, you know, yeah, okay, I got your question. So the question Prashant is asking is, a lot of times we can't foresee what is required before, right? I mean, there is some requirement you go, you get and you start building on it, but you can't foresee and how to you know, accommodate and be flexible and scalable in those cases. So that's the question, right, Prashant?
Yes, that's the question.
Yes. Okay. So for this, right, what happens is like, you're right. I mean, you can't always foresee what is coming next, right? But when you're getting that requirement and when you're keeping the users first, you try to understand what they exactly want. Let's like, and with regards to prioritization, what will happen is you don't give something which doesn't work. Like, let me give an example of e-commerce platform, right? Like, for example, if you're building a wish list is like where, you know, right now I don't plan to, I'm like that, I'm just adding some items to the wish list so that, you know, later on I can just go back to that wish list and select what I actually want to buy, right? So this is the user problem that we are trying to solve, right? So basically they can put things in the wish list and so that they can select it later. So when you're building it, you when you're building it, you take care that when you're allowing the user to add items to the wish list, they either have to log in or they can, you know, you can save it in a cache and, you know, later on when they log in, it's still available, right? No, in like, I remember when I was using the a new e-commerce platform, I spent so many hours, you know, to, you know, add it to the wish list, and eventually when I was trying to log in, all that wish list was gone, right? That's a bad user experience. Now, what we could have ideally done is ask the user before itself that, you know, you need to log in. If I'm not building that cache feature, at least to avoid that bad user experience, I could have told that, you know, you need to log in, right? That's the first step. Later on in the next iteration or, you know, maybe next release, I could have built that additional feature where I could like store it in a cache and it's available after login also, right? It's saved, right? So this is how you can prioritize it. You can't build a Rome, right? Rome was not built in a day, right? It took time. So it's okay. I mean, it's okay to prioritize and build really, I mean, really, you know, a very usable product, even with minimum things. But whatever you're building has to add some value and not annoy or frustrate the user.
Okay, thank you. There is another question not regarding the prioritization. It's a choice. Okay. Now we have domain-driven design, okay, or data-driven design, or a event-driven design, or a model-driven design, like this. Already in the industry, everybody has, let's say, stalwarts and architects have told this. You can use domain-driven or sometimes data driven. So how do we make sure which is feasible to choose, choice to be made? It's a data driven or a model driven or domain driven or a event driven. So while designing itself, we need to make a choice, right? So on what basis we can make a call?
Okay, we are short of time, but this is the last question we will take. So yeah, so so this question is like there are so many design techniques, right? Design driven, model driven design and all that. So the question is like, how do you choose, right? Which model, I mean, which technique we need to take? Again, these all data driven or model driven. It's all about, again, it's coming back to the same thing, you're solving some problem, right? It is about taking an informed decision to solve that problem, which technique will work for you, right? There is no hard rule that this is going to work for this particular solution. There is no blueprint for it. It's about you need to identify what will help to whether it is a technology or any technique or anything. It's about what will help to solve that user problem. I think when we put the user problem right first, like having an easy onboarding process or helping the user to get started, something like as simple as helping the user get started, that's a simple problem statement, right? That solves all that problem. Now, how you help the user to get started to using your business solution, then you start thinking about, okay, what technology or what technique I need to use. You don't start with, okay, which technology I need to use. You start with what you're trying to solve. And that really helps in also helps you in identifying what libraries you need to use, what is the technology or what is the technique you want to use. It's about creating that informed decision, looking at the problem statement first.
Okay.
So I think we it's 7:30 and it's about time. Yeah. Okay. So thank you everybody for joining in from Pune office and also remote. I mean, you can connect us, connect me in this Instagram, in the LinkedIn and the Twitter handle. Thank you. We will inform you of the next day DevDay event in the channel. Thank you.
Thank you.